So today I'm here to talk about the United Arab Emirates, UAE. So let's begin with a bit of background and history. The trucial states of the Persian Gulf Coast granted the UK control of their defense and foreign affairs in 19th century treaties. In 1971, six of these states, Abu Dhabi, Ajman, Al Fujairah, Al Sharika, Dubai, and Al Quwain, merged to form the United Arab Emirates, UAE. They were joined in 1972 by Ras Al Khaimah, the then ruler of UAE. For more than 3 decades, oil and global finance drove the UAE's economy. However, in 2008-9, the confluence of falling oil prices, collapsing real estate prices, and the international banking crisis hit the UAE especially hard. In recent years, UAE has played a vital role in regional affairs. In addition to donating billions of dollars in economic aid to help stabilize Egypt, the UAE is a member of a US-led global alliance to defeat the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, and also the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. UAE is also helping Saudi-led military campaign to restore the government of Yemen in the Yemen civil war. Now I'm moving on to the geography of United Arab Emirates. UAE is situated in the Middle East, bordering the Gulf of Oman and the Persian Gulf, bordering Oman and Saudi Arabia. In terms of area, UAE is half the size of Karnataka and is almost the size of England. UAE has a coastline of 1,300 kilometers, while India has a coastline of 7,000 kilometers. Now we move on to the natural resources of UAE, starting with natural gases, limestone, petroleum, diamonds, chromite, titanium, bauxite, mica, manganese, iron, and coal. 73% of UAE is desert, 18% developed, 4% agricultural use, and 3% forest. The terrain of UAE is very flat, but in the desert it is full of sand dunes, and in the east full of mountains. Now let me make this clear to you. What is where? If you go to the north, you find cities like Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah, and they are really urbanized. But if you go to the south, you have less urbanized desert regions. You go to the pointy place and you go little west over there, you find really urbanized cities with really high population density. Now you can conclude that north is urbanized, south is less urbanized. North is less deserty, south is more deserty. UAE has an average altitude of 149 meters compared to 900 of Bangalore. Elevation extremes. Lowest point Persian Gulf 0 meters, highest point Jabal Ibir Mountains 1500 meters. That is what you see in the screen. The only natural hazard that ever happens in UAE is frequent sand and dust storms. Usually the Arabian Sea is calm. The present environmental issues are lack of natural freshwater resources compensated by desalination plants, desertification, beach pollution from oil spills. Now we move on to people. According to the UN, UAE has a population of 9.4 million people as of mid-year 2017 compared to 1.3 billion that of India's. UAE has seen a significant growth in population since 1968, 1,80,000 to almost 9.4 million. Northern UAE accounts for 85% of UAE's population. There are 3 reasons for this. 1. Level of urbanization. 2. Rate of urbanization. And 3. Access to basic human needs, which is not available in the southern UAE. Now we move on to the ethnic groups in UAE. 38% Indian, 9% Bangladeshi and Pakistani, 10% Iraqi and 6% Filipinos, 11% localites. The reason for this is the number of job opportunities in UAE. Foreigners in fact come searching for it from all over the world, especially South Asia. Arabic, Persian, English, Hindi and Urdu are the languages used in UAE. In schools, Arabic and English are encouraged. The religions practiced in UAE are Islam 76%, Christianity 9%, Hindu and Buddhism 5%, Jewish and Sikh 5%. UAE, the median age is 30.3 years, while the birth rate is 15.1 births per 1,000 people and death rate is 1.9 deaths per 1,000 people. The fact is that more people migrate to UAE and less people migrate from UAE. UAE has the 10th least migration rate in the world, 10 migrants per 1,000 people every year. Sorry for saying this again, but the reason for more people migrating to UAE is the fact that UAE has an ocean of jobs. While the urban population is 86%, the rate of urbanization is 2.32 annual. In UAE, the life expectancy at birth is 77.5 years compared to 68 of India's. There is one hospital bed and one physician for every 1,000 people of UAE. The literacy rate in UAE is 93.8%, higher than the world average. The unemployment population is 12% compared to 10% of India's. But still, we Indians go looking for job in UAE. Since the discovery of oil in UAE nearly 60 years ago, the country has undergone a profound transformation from an impoverished region of small desert principalities to a modern state with a high standard of living. The government has increased spending on job creation and infrastructure expansion and is opening up utilities to greater private sector involvement. The country's free trade zone, offering 100% foreign ownership and zero taxes, are helping to attract foreign investors. In 2009, the global financial crisis restricted trade and constricted the economy of UAE. The crisis hit Dubai the hardest, as it was heavily exposed to depressed real estate prices. Dubai lacked sufficient cash to meet its debt obligations, prompting global concern about its solvency and ultimately a $20 billion bailout from the UAE Central Bank and Abu Dhabi government that was refinanced in March 2014. The GDP of UAE is $668 billion, nothing compared to $8,000 trillion of India's. But for such a small country, it is quite a good GDP. The growth rate of GDP in UAE is 2.7%. In India, it's almost 8%. Now we move on to GDP composition by sector of origin. Agriculture is almost nothing, 0.8%. Industry 39.5%. Services 40.1%. The agricultural products of UAE are watermelon, fish, poultry products and dates. The industries in UAE are petroleum and oil, cement and aluminium, textile and handicraft and fertilizers. Industrial production growth rate of UAE is 1.9% compared to 5% of India. Population below poverty line in UAE is 19.5% in 2003. UAE mainly trades with India, Iran, Japan, Switzerland, Oman, and China. In UAE, the rulers of the 7 Emirates each select a proportion of voters for the Federal National Council that together account for about 12% of Emirati citizens. They vote and select their leader. This is President Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan since November 3, 2004. He was the ruler of Abu Dhabi and now is the president and is the chief of. This is the Federal Supreme Court. This is the highest court of UAE. Judges are appointed by the federal president following approval by the Federal Supreme Council. This is the national symbol of UAE, a golden falcon with the national colors green, white, black, and red. This is a national flag of UAE. 3 equal horizontal bands of green on the top, white, and black, with a wider vertical red band on the hoist side. The flag incorporates all 4 pan-Arab colors, which in this case represent fertility, green, neutrality, white, petroleum resources, black, and unity, red. Red was a traditional color incorporated into all flags of the Emirates before their unification. UAE is a very interesting country to research and know about. Don't stop your research here. Continue and know everything about it. Please comment the mistakes I have done in this video, factual and pronouncing. Thank you.